Michelle, thanks again for joining us today. Really appreciate you joining. And kind of firstly, I wanted to congratulate you on really your recognition as a leading innovator and businesswoman in the healthcare industry. Being one of the top 100 most creative people in the business by Fast Company is really impressive, really a massive achievement. Are you able to pinpoint one moment in time when you really realized you wanted to be a physician scientist?
Oh, fascinating. I guess I've always thought of myself as an inventor. So when I, went into medicine, it was with the goal of, inventing through the lens of understanding medicine and science. So I think probably I wasn't someone who was born to be a physician, but as I always was, I think, born to invent and create. Like that's what I really am most driven by. But love medicine because of the opportunity, to care for people and really understand the human experience, and bringing invention into that, as I has really been what's driven me to become a physician scientist. But I can't say there was one moment in time, but I remember when I was young, learning about Madame Curie and her.
Absolutely. So it sounds like you've really been involved with healthcare and it's been kind of a passion for you from, the patient experience perspective for a while. When did you kind of decide that you were going to create Medable? And what really made you want to help clinicians and patients navigate their way through clinical trials more specifically?
Sure. So, when I was at Stanford and I was in my residency and training in dermatology, I was in a specific uh, kind of path in my residency, which was for physician scientists. So I was, training in dermatology. And then in my final year, I was just, seeing patients a half a day a week and working in the lab. Doing research the other amount of the time. And it was really then that I saw firsthand, the opportunity for technology to drive research forward as I was leading up research in rare disease and taking care of patients who had a very rare disease called systemic sclerosis, and also conducting research on with these patients, specifically looking at identical twins. So I was recruiting for research a very rare population of patients, and even more rare in the fact they were identical twins. And so it was really then that I thought, we need new technologies that enable research anytime, anywhere, enable us to connect with patients worldwide. I was calling everyone I knew to ask them, hey, do you happen to have patients who have systemic sclerosis who are also identical twins? And, that's a pretty laborious process. And being in Silicon Valley, being at Stanford, I remember it was a time when there were apps like Yo, and I did yoga next to the place where the Waze was, the office for Waze, and you just are in a place where you start to see, new opportunities for driving change through, the startup and entrepreneurship path. And I thought this would be a really to drive forward the needs and technology that research really has. And so, through my residency program at Stanford, started getting involved in entrepreneurship with the mission of building Medable to transform research. And, as went to hackathons, went to have, venture pitches, pitched everybody on Sand Hill Road, and really, went from this is something that we should do is an idea, to something where we were really on the path to doing it as a startup and through entrepreneurship.
Wow, yeah, such a powerful mission for sure, and such a great place to be, exploring that space. And then when thinking about diversity in clinical trials, women, communities of color, perhaps participants in poorer rural areas, maybe gender binary communities. How do you feel Medable is complementing patient recruitment efforts with education to really build participant trust in clinical trials in these areas?
Sure. So, I mean, people sometimes think that the majority of clinical trial participants are doing this because they're, want to volunteer and make change. And that's a part of it. But the majority of people in clinical trials are seeking new therapeutic options for themselves. And that's because they're frustrated or disappointed by, where their current therapy is getting them to in terms of the health they're seeking. So, to me, access to new therapies through clinical trials is no different than access to healthcare broadly, is something that is super important for everybody to have equal access to. Clinical trials, have historically suffered from very low diversity. And this means two things. It means that, people don't have enough access to these new therapies as an important option for them in seeking better health. And then the second is that our understanding of the safety and efficacy of those medications is limited by the diversity of the participant pool. So I think that, digital technologies and just an overall stop at nothing mentality around creating inclusivity in clinical research and clinical care broadly is something that Medable has in its DNA. Have we solved it? I don't think so. But are we mission driven to do it? Absolutely. And when you look at the actual kind of representation of diversity in our clinical trials, we are breaking down some of the historic barriers. There's better, more equality in the gender representation, in the overall diversity representation. And I think you raise a great point, Frances, when you're, thinking about this from all angles. And in general, it's something that we're engaging patients who represent these diverse populations and getting their firsthand perspective on what are the barriers around knowledge, and then what are the questions and what are the fears, so that we can address those up front through our digital solutions and through our brand, and in terms of also how we just engage patients. So we don't have all of the answers, but we're really dedicated to making this a big part of our impact. And I'd say the thing I point to, really are two things. One is our Patient Advisory Council, who is a very diverse group who provides a firsthand, who are really the beacons and guides for how we can tackle this. And then two, our data that does show we're breaking down some of those diversity barriers. But we as an industry have a long way to go, and Medable really wants to drive this to full equality in terms of access and representation.
Absolutely. I think that's really, really exciting and important from an equal access perspective. So what approaches has Medable found to be successful in really balancing safety and also broadening representation of patients with diverse clinical backgrounds? For example, pregnant women.
Yeah, I mean, the most important thing is patient safety. So we want to provide new opportunities for therapies, but we always want to do that in the context of patient safety first. And so, one of the really powerful things about digital and real-time connectivity and kind of research anytime, anywhere, is that we have real-time data, from patients who are participating in clinical trials. And we can analyze that, with clinicians as well as with algorithms to ensure that that data is being evaluated on a continuous basis. So, I think that digital and decentralized clinical trials offer a big step forward in safety. With that said, it's always you have to make that commitment and have many different aspects of that strategy in place to make sure you're really upholding that commitment. So one of the things our company just recently did is we're pursuing our ISO certification for software as a medical device. And this is a very rigorous quality program that's in place across our people, our processes, and our product, to ensure that we're able to really automate the interpretation of some of the patient data to a degree of which we can guarantee patient safety. So there's a number of strategies one needs to take in terms of patient safety, but I think the most exciting thing is that digital can connect us with patients. We can capture that data in real time, and it can be evaluated to identify safety signals immediately, and offering patients, I think, actually greater safety as we advance digital and clinical trials in general.
No, absolutely. And it feels like there's tons of value that I think you and your team have kind of accepted. Do you feel from like a maturity perspective that other biopharma and industry players are mature enough to kind of take on digital applications and are, excited about this seismic shift?
I think that, I always think about the silver lining of COVID-19. And one of the big things is that, necessity is kind of not only the mother of invention, but the mother of adoption. And because the clinical sites were shut down and because we had limited access in person, we've seen this massive kind of adoption and interest, more than interest, truly adoption of digital and decentralized clinical trials. And that's given us the opportunity to show the benefit, show the impact, and for people to get really comfortable with these different approaches. So I think, if you'd asked me this a year ago, I would say really we're still in an edge case scenario. But with COVID-19, digital and decentralized has really become a main case. And our partners across biopharma are absolutely leveraging these technologies today and are planning on in a post-COVID world for these to be central to their strategies, largely because of the benefit to historic problems in clinical trials, like access for patients across, general access as well as diversity, as well as, the quality of the data and the real-time nature of the data being an additional benefit.
No, absolutely. I think you make a good point. COVID, as hard as the pandemic's been, it's definitely accelerated that adoption of digital to across the industry. So I think you make a great point. And as a company, how do you feel you've addressed the digital divide that has really pervaded healthcare, both in telemedicine and DCTs?
Yeah, so, again, I think prior to COVID, digital was always trying to make its way in and say, here's why it matters and here's why it's important. But there's just nothing like true transformation and firsthand experience to say, oh no, this is actually my preference. So, I think really we had been evangelists and, really proving out the benefit. But now that there's actually a shift in preference for patients and doctors, sponsors and CROs, that just really takes something that I think was a divide to something that is really a true transformation across all stakeholders. So I guess it's a matter of providing, being ready for the window of opportunity for that divide to close, and then, being a partner to those stakeholders when that divide really does close. And I think we're at that point.
And do you have a focus on a specific therapeutic area from a study perspective, or are you kind of interested kind of across the gamut there?
We really work across areas. Our company and where we are developing kind of deep strategic focus is in oncology, also in dermatology, cardiology, and pulmonology. And that's because our partners, as well as rare disease, and that's really because our partners have, we've worked hand in hand with them on what digital means in these therapeutic areas. And the therapeutic area focus is important to driving innovation because, each specialty of medicine operates differently, and the patients with those conditions, have a unique perspective by virtue of that condition. So I think the therapeutic area focus is important. And we do have several therapeutic areas where, we want to provide an end-to-end digital solution that really serves patients with that specific condition.
No, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And do you feel that there have been any specific challenges that you could pinpoint, or potentially any advantages that you may have experienced as a woman in comparison to potential male colleagues, especially as a CEO? And maybe that's, within the industry or outside of the industry, but it'd be interesting from a physician perspective. And then also as a CEO, have you seen any specific challenges or advantages that may be helpful for us to hear?
I think that the data is interesting and pretty revealing when you look at, the percent of founders who are women who successfully raise venture capital. And I think that, that reflects a certain bias that is certainly a headwind for women and for founders of any type that don't meet the profile that people have seen before. And I think that, women are in that category. And that's something certainly where, I had to beat down the doors. But with that said, being a founder of a company is never easy, and you just stay on the path and you continue to really fight for what you believe in. And I think that, fundamentally, when I saw in medicine is when I was young, there was this joke, and it was about a surgeon who was in a car accident, and it was something like, surgeons in a car accident, and they take the child to the hospital, and the surgeon says, or there's two people in a car accident, take the child to the hospital. The surgeon says, I can't operate on this child because it's my son. And the joke, and it's like, who is the surgeon? And the joke was that the surgeon was the mother. At this point, women are 50% or more of the workforce in medicine. And I think what's important about that is that how quickly the world can change when you see someone you relate to in the job that you want to have. So I guess, the takeaway is that I want to I want to be a part of a change and something that's the new norm, where women see women CEOs, and it's something that they absolutely relate to and see as a possibility for them. And I think that that's how change is really made. It's when you see someone doing something, you can relate to that person and you think, I can do that too. So I've seen that transformation firsthand in medicine from the time I was young to now, being a part of that workforce. And I think that, I want to be a part of driving that similar change in the world of being a CEO, so that, women and people of all walks of life can look at this opportunity of building a company, which is by far one of the most challenging but rewarding things you could do, and to feel and know that opportunity is open to them.
So just interested in that same vein, is that one of the reasons that you joined Springboard and kind of this network of female entrepreneurs? And what benefit has that provided as well?
Yeah, it's super interesting. Like, I guess I want to be known for being awesome at what I do and be selected for what I do, because of my merits and like everything that I am, and not any one aspect of that. So I think like what attracted me to Springboard is it really is it's a network of women who are really helping women overcome barriers in building businesses. And it's just an incredible professional network, of support. And I think I joined it because it's authentic and it's real. And Amy and Kay understand how hard it is to build a business and really help you overcome the key barriers of building a business. I think that the network of women is an important part of it, but I think, it's really about just how challenging it is to build a business, and Kay and Amy's firsthand knowledge, support, and drive to helping women, be transformational business leaders.
No, absolutely. I think that's why we're so excited about the partnership with Springboard and working with folks
Yeah.
like yourself, right? Because it's about empowering that network and really driving entrepreneurship and innovation, across every industry, right? So
Yeah, and it's amazing. They do this and because they believe in the change that they're making. You look at, Y Combinator or other accelerators who have an equity stake or some relationship ownership stake. That's not how Springboard is. That's not how they do it. They do it because they believe in the women that they're backing, and they do it, in a really authentic and sincere way that I just totally think is different than a lot of how other people approach this.
absolutely. You're definitely a success story for them. So again, congratulations on the recent round.
I love them. They're really amazing.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Michelle. Really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you guys so much. That was so fun. And I'm so glad to have discovered a new podcast and have met more awesome people.